On the AP Calc exam, you might see a graph, then a graph of a derivative, then a table, and it can feel like three totally different problems, but honestly, most of the time, they're asking the same thing. Once you can tell what quantity you're looking at, what quantity they want, and how to justify your answer, a lot of these questions get a lot easier. Okay, so before we do anything else, I want to give us a picture that's going to come back over and over in this video. At the top, we have f, which is the amount of something. Below that is f prime, which is the rate that amount is changing. And below that is f double prime, which is the rate that the rate is changing. To move up and down this list, we can either differentiate, which moves us down, or we can integrate, which moves us up. So if we're on f and we want to get to f prime, we're moving down, so we differentiate. And if we're on f prime and we want to get back to f, we want to move up, so we integrate. That's it. Every time we see a graph or a table question on the AP exam, we're going to ask ourselves four things. What did they give me? So am I looking at f? Am I looking at f prime? Or is this a table of values? Second, what do they want? Do they want information about f prime, maybe about an integral? Third, do I need to go up or down in this list in order to get to what they've asked me for? And fourth, what sentence do I actually need to write down in order to earn credit, in order to earn the points? And honestly, this last one here is where a lot of people lose points, even when they've done the math right. So we're going to come back to that at the end of the video. Okay, so now let's get into the most common thing the AP exam does, which is to show us the graph of f prime. And this is tough because it looks like a normal graph. It's got curves, it's got x-intercepts, it looks like f, but it's not f, it's the derivative. So the whole thing here is remembering that we're one spot down on that list from where the graph looks like it is. We're on f prime and we're trying to pull out information about f. So when they're showing you f prime, there's a really good chance they're going to ask you for the intervals on which f is increasing. And the thing to remember here is that we have the graph of f prime, not f. So we're asking where f is increasing. And the way we figure that out is by looking at the sign of f prime. F is increasing wherever f prime is positive. So all we really need to do is look at our graph and find where it's above the x-axis. Those intervals are where f is increasing. Then we write our answer in interval notation. If we imagine this graph going on forever to the left, we have negative infinity over here. This graph is positive above the x-axis, starting at the left-hand side and all the way until we get to x equals 1. That's the point at which it goes from being above the x-axis to then below the x-axis. So here, from negative infinity to 1 is where the graph is above the x-axis, and then it's above the x-axis again, starting at 3 and going infinitely out to the right here toward positive infinity. They're also probably going to ask us for the x values where f has a relative maximum or minimum. And what we want to remember is that relative extrema of f happen wherever f prime changes sign, not just where f prime is 0, but where it actually crosses from positive to negative or negative to positive. So if f prime goes from negative to positive, that's a relative minimum of f. And if f prime goes from positive to negative, that's a relative maximum. In our case, we see that at this point right here, the graph of f, when we're moving from left to right, goes from positive above the x-axis to negative below the x-axis. So this is going from positive to negative, which means right here at x equals 1, we have a relative maximum. And over here, as we move from left to right, the graph is going from negative below the x-axis down here to positive above the x-axis, crossing over right here at x equals 3. So going from negative to positive on the derivative function, that means the original function, f of x, has a relative minimum. Make sure that you're checking here on the derivative function that the sign actually flips, that the derivative function actually crosses over the x-axis. If you have a derivative function, something that looks like this, that maybe intersects the x-axis here at x equals -1, that derivative function touches the x-axis, but it doesn't actually cross over it. So a point like that doesn't indicate a relative maximum or minimum of the original function f. They're also almost certainly going to ask you where the original function f is concave up or down, and concavity of f comes from f double prime, the second derivative. But we don't have the graph of the second derivative, we have the graph of f prime, the derivative function. So we have to think about what f double prime actually is. The second derivative, f double prime, it's just the derivative of f prime, which means it's the slope of this derivative graph. That means that f is concave up wherever the derivative is increasing, not where the derivative is positive, where it's increasing. That means we're looking at whether this graph is going up or down, not whether it's above or below the x-axis. So given this derivative, we see that it is increasing from x equals 2 all the way out toward positive infinity. So because the derivative function is increasing on that interval, the original function f has to be concave up on that same interval. And then similarly, because the derivative is decreasing on this interval negative infinity to 2, that means the original function f has to be concave down on that interval. Just be careful here though that the zeros of f prime, the places where it crosses the x-axis, those are not the zeros of the original function f. They are places where f has a horizontal tangent, so they're candidates for critical points of f. But the value of f at those points is something totally different, and we can't read it off this graph. Okay, so now let's say that they give us just the graph of f, not the derivative, not f prime, just plain f. And I want to make sure that we don't panic here because honestly, nothing really changes. We're doing the exact same thing. We're just pulling the derivative information out of the shape of the graph instead of off of a separate graph. So f is increasing wherever the slope of the graph is positive and decreasing wherever the slope is negative. Relative extrema happen at horizontal tangents where the slope actually changes sign. And f is concave up where the slopes are getting bigger as we move left to right and concave down where the slopes are getting smaller. So really, we're just reading slope information off the picture. Same list we've been talking about in terms of f, f prime, f double prime, same logic. We're just one step up in that list when we're looking at f from where we were just a minute ago when we were looking at f prime. All right, so we've talked a little bit about graphs, but tables are another thing you're going to see all the time on the AP exam. And tables are a really common place to lose points because it's easy to get lost in what the table is actually telling you. The first thing with tables that you'll really commonly see on the AP exam is being asked to estimate a derivative. The way that we do that is by using average rate of change around the point where we're supposed to estimate. So let's say we're being asked to estimate the value of the derivative at 5. We see that we have 5 in our table, but we don't actually use the values of f and f prime at 5 itself. Instead, we take the two surrounding values from the table, so in this case 2 and 6, and we just do rise over run. We're looking for the slope at 5, and even though when we hear slope, we think derivative, we want the slope of f. So we're going to use 8 and 15, or f of 2 and f of 6, and when we plug that into our average rate of change formula, we get 15 minus 8 over 6 minus 2, or 7 over 4, which tells us that the slope of f at x equals 5 is approximately 7/4, or that's the best estimate we can get of slope using the values in this table. Keep in mind, for a question like this one, when we're asked to estimate a derivative, we probably don't have this row here in the table. We're probably just given the x and f of x rows because, of course, this value here is the exact value of the derivative at 5. And they're probably not going to ask us to estimate the derivative when we already have the exact value. So when you only have x and f of x and you're asked to estimate a derivative, this is how you do it. So we're also going to use this table to look at two other things, including integral estimates, and then we'll also look at a mean value theorem problem. Given a table like this one, it's not uncommon to be asked to estimate the integral of f over the interval of the table. You see here 0 to 12, and this table spans from 0 to 12. Let's say we're asked to estimate using a trapezoidal sum. Now, the one thing I want you to be really careful about here is that our x values, 0, 2, 5, 6, 9, 12, are unevenly spaced. So the widths between those values are 2, and then 2 to 5 is 3, 5 to 6 is 1, 6 to 9 is 3, and 9 to 12 is 3. Those gaps are all different widths, so there's no shortcut trapezoidal formula that's going to work here. We have to do each of these pieces separately, find the area of each trapezoid, and add them all up. So for each trapezoid, the area is 1/2 times the width times the sum of the two heights. So for this first trapezoid here, we take 1/2 times the width, which is that width between the x values, 2, times the sum of those two heights, the heights on either side, in this case 3 and 8, which we get from the f of x row in our table. So the 1/2 and the 2 cancel, and we just get 8 plus 3 is 11. And we can set this up for the other trapezoids as well. So for the second one, we'll get 1/2 times the width is 3, times the sum of the f of x values, 8 and 17. So 8 plus 17. And then for the other three, we'll set them up so 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2 times the widths 1, 3, and 3 times the sum of the heights. So we did 8 plus 17. We have 17 plus 15, and then 15 plus 9, and then 9 plus 6. And when we do the math there, we're going to get 37.5. We'll get 16 here. This will be 36, and this will be 22.5. And when we add up all 5 of those values, we get 123 as a trapezoidal estimate for the integral from the table. Now, the last thing here with the table is a mean value theorem justification. And the thing that really matters here is writing out the full sentence, not just writing by MVT at the end of our work. We actually have to state the conditions of the theorem and then state what the conclusion gives us. So let's say the problem tells us that f is differentiable, and it asks us to justify that there's some value c in the interval from 2 to 12 where f prime of c equals the average rate of change of f on that interval. We actually have to write out this full sentence here. So we'd write something like, since f is differentiable on the closed interval from 2 to 12, and f is continuous on the open interval 2 to 12, then by the mean value theorem, there has to be some c in the open interval 2 to 12, that symbol means in, where f prime of c is given by this average rate of change formula. And if we plug in values from our table, we know that f of 12 is 6. We know that f of 2 is 8. We're getting those from our f of x row in the table. And then we're dividing that by 12 minus 2, or 10. We get -2 over 10 is -1 over 5. This whole sentence here is what's going to earn us the points. So we want to get in the habit of writing the conditions, then writing the theorem, then writing the conclusion, then plugging in the values from our table. Okay, so now I want to spend a minute on accumulation functions because they show up constantly on the AP exam, and they line up really nicely with this list f, f prime, f double prime that we've been using this whole video. An accumulation function looks like this. So mathematically, g is our accumulation function, and f is the thing we're integrating. And here's what we can say about g just by looking at the graph of f. First, g prime, the derivative of g, is equal to f of x. So f is the derivative of g. That's the fundamental theorem of calculus right there. Because of that, though, or flowing out of that, we get several properties of g that we can use, like the fact that g is increasing wherever f of x is positive, and g is decreasing wherever f of x is negative. G also has a relative extremum wherever f changes sign, and g is concave up wherever f is increasing. Because the derivative of g is f, so the derivative of g is the rate of change of f. So if we know the graph of f, we already know everything about how g behaves. We're just one step up that list from f to g. Same logic we were using this whole video for graphs, just applied in the other direction. Okay, now we should just do some quick recognition with a few more patterns that always show up on the AP exam, because these are really the same ideas we've been using, just presented in a different way. First one here, chain rule from a table. If they ask us for the derivative of f composed with g at x equals 2, we're using chain rule. So we find g of 2 from the table, we plug that in, and that leaves us with f prime of 1. We then go back to the table, we look for that value, and finally we can plug in. We've got everything down to real values, and we can say that this is -8. All the values you need are always sitting right here in the table. Next pattern is inverse derivatives from a table. So if we know, for example, from a table that f of 3 is 7, then we can find the derivative of the inverse of f at 7. So the way that that works is we take 1 over f prime at the original x value at 3, and then the derivative, this derivative here, the derivative of the inverse at 7 is 1 over f prime of 3. We flip the input and the output, and we take the reciprocal of f prime at the original x. This is a really good pattern to remember, because what they'll do is ask you for this, and they'll give you a table that shows you that at x equals 3, f of x is 7. So you'll just have this value in a table, and you'll be expected to find this you have to be able to remember this formula and go find f prime of 3 in that same table. Last one here, particle motion. Just like that list we've been looking at this whole time, f prime, f double prime, s of t is going to give you position, v of t, which is the derivative, is going to give you velocity, and a of t, which is the second derivative, is going to give you acceleration. It's really just that same list again, but with different names. So when you have a particle motion problem, once you've kind of labeled what's what, we just remember to move down this list by differentiating and up the list by integrating. Still just the same thing we've been doing this whole video, just different names for these functions: position, velocity, acceleration. All right, so this last part is really important because this is where a lot of people lose points even when they have the right answer. Your explanation has to use the right words or the graders aren't going to give you credit. So here's the checklist. When you have a graph, always read the axis labels so you understand what you're looking at. Name whatever quantity is being shown. In other words, identify what they've given you, what they've told you. Then name the quantity they're asking about. What are you actually being asked for? Make sure that you're using the right derivative or integral relationship. Are you moving down that list from f to f prime to f double prime, or up the list from f double prime to f prime to f? Make sure that you justify your answer using actual function names, not just vague words. And whenever you're giving an answer, you have to include units that match the ones you were given in the problem. If you do these things every time, you're going to be way less likely to miss something easy. So as an example, here's a weak justification that a lot of people write. The graph is positive, so it increases. Well, that kind of gets at the idea, but it's not going to earn points on the exam. Here's the version that actually will. Something like this: because the graph shown is the derivative, f prime of x, and because f prime of x is greater than 0, it's positive, on the interval 1 to 3, or from x equals 1 to x equals 3, that means that f is increasing on that same interval from 1 to 3. You can see the difference between these two justifications. The second one names the function. It also names the quantity. It says that it's positive. It uses the correct relationship between f prime and f, and it states a clear conclusion. This is what you're looking to do every single time. And just one more thing that's absolutely critical to remember: 0, positive, negative, increasing, decreasing, concave up and down, those are not interchangeable ideas. They all mean different things. So a function can be both positive and decreasing at the same time. It can also be increasing and concave down at the same time. These are different pieces of information, and AP cares that we use the right one. If you're trying to figure out whether the original function f is positive or negative, you need to check the sign of f itself. Is it above or below the x-axis? If you're trying to determine whether f is increasing or decreasing, you need to check the sign of the derivative f prime, whether the derivative is above or below the x-axis. And if you're trying to check whether f, the original function, is concave up or concave down, you need to check the sign of the second derivative f prime, whether the second derivative is above or below the x-axis. So we want to be precise. If we mean f is positive, we say f is positive. If we mean f is increasing, we say f is increasing. Those are two different things. So bringing it back to the beginning, just remember that if graph and table questions have felt kind of random, they're really not. Most of them are doing the same thing. They're asking the same kinds of questions, just in different ways. We need to figure out what quantity we're looking at. We figure out what they're asking us for. We decide whether we're moving down this list by differentiating or moving up this list by integrating. And we always, always, always write a clear sentence that uses the right words. That's pretty much it. If you can do these things, there's a huge chunk of questions on the AP exam that are going to get a lot easier.